Ordinary people, extraordinary faith. They walked in faith before us, faced trials, doubts, and destiny. Their faith changed history and still speaks today. Welcome to Echoes of Faith, where faith echoes through time. Samson's story begins with a miraculous promise. His barren mother received a message from an angel. She would have a son who would be set apart for God as a Nazirite. From birth, Samson was destined for greatness. He was not to drink wine, touch anything unclean, or cut his hair. These vows symbolized his dedication to God and the divine purpose for his life. As a young man, Samson's incredible strength became evident, a gift from God that set him apart. Yet, even early on, we see hints of his impulsive nature. He often acted on instinct rather than wisdom, a trait that would later lead to both his greatest victories and his deepest failures. Samson was a man of extremes. On the one hand, his strength was unmatched. He tore apart a lion with his bare hands, defeated armies of Philistines single-handedly, and carried the gates of a city on his shoulders. These feats made him a legend. But his strength was matched by his weaknesses, especially his desire for women and his struggle with self-control. Samson's first recorded act of defiance was his choice to marry a Philistine woman, despite his parents' warnings. This decision wasn't just a rebellion against his family. It showed his tendency to follow his emotions rather than God's guidance. Though this marriage ended in betrayal and heartbreak, it also led to the first major confrontation between Samson and the Philistines. Samson's victories often came at a cost. After the betrayal of his wife, he burned the Philistines' fields in anger, sparking a cycle of violence. His strength made him a hero to the Israelites, but also isolated him. Despite his divine calling, Samson seemed to struggle with loneliness, anger, and a sense of direction. Perhaps the most well-known chapter of Samson's life is his relationship with Delilah. She was a Philistine woman who captivated Samson's heart. He loved her deeply, but this love blinded him to her true intentions. Delilah, bribed by the Philistine leaders, sought to discover the secret of his strength. Samson's interactions with Delilah reveal his inner turmoil. He toyed with her questions, giving her false answers 3 times. But his eventual surrender was not just a moment of weakness. It was a reflection of his deep desire to be loved and understood. When he finally revealed that his strength came from his uncut hair, he wasn't just giving away a secret. He was laying bare his soul. Delilah's betrayal was devastating. She lulled Samson to sleep, had his hair cut, and handed him over to the Philistines. They blinded him and imprisoned him, forcing him to grind grain like an animal. For Samson, this was rock bottom. Stripped of his strength, sight, and dignity, he had nothing left but his faith. In his darkest hour, Samson began to reflect. Imprisoned and humiliated, he turned back to God. His hair began to grow, symbolizing not just the return of his strength, but the renewal of his relationship with God. At a great Philistine celebration, Samson was brought out to entertain the crowds. Standing between 2 pillars of the temple, he prayed one last, desperate prayer. "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more." This prayer was not just for strength. It was a cry of repentance and trust in God. With all his might, Samson pushed against the pillars, collapsing the temple and killing more Philistines in his death than he had in his life. In this final act, Samson fulfilled his divine purpose, but it came at the ultimate cost. Samson's story is both tragic and triumphant. He was a man of incredible potential, chosen by God to deliver Israel. Yet, he was also deeply flawed, impulsive, prideful, and driven by his desires. Despite his weaknesses, God used him to accomplish great things. Samson's life reminds us that God can work through imperfect people. His story is a testament to God's grace and power, showing that even in our failures, there is hope for redemption. Samson was not just a hero. He was a man who struggled, fell, and rose again, proving that God's strength is made perfect in our weakness. This is the story of Samson, a man whose life was marked by both triumph and tragedy, a man whose faith ultimately led him to fulfill God's purpose, even in his final breath.